We're going to be talking about solutions for small scale growers. And we have Edee joining us as well. Edee is going to be presenting a piece on alternative economies within the context of this topic. And before she starts, I'm going to take about the first hour here up until about 10 to kind of look at some of the issues of trying to monetize the small scale organic farm. The first thing I wanted to start with, though, is this fact that small scale farmers feed the world. And from a North American perspective, let's zoom in on a little bit of that a little bit. And this should look familiar to Edee here in particular. But from a North American perspective, where you see, especially in media and on television and different things, and you see like these giant farms, especially in the Midwest and the prairies area, and down into the States, especially, and giant farms growing grains, giant farms doing like shoulder to shoulder livestock, and it gives you the impression that these big agro businesses are the ones feeding the world. And the message they always send out too is that they are trying to feed the world. That's like what the whole GMO crop movement is about. They're trying to feed the world, and all these big farms always talk about feeding the world. But it's small scale farmers that actually like feed their families. And yeah, many small scale farmers feeding their families. And by the time you're done doing the math, and the UN has done this math, here is an article from a woman named Hillel Elver, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food. And she has some great quotes in here. Here's one in particular that I wanted to highlight. Come on, work with me. That small scale farmers do indeed feed the world. 70% of the food that is consumed globally comes from small scale farmers. And so we're talking about people going out and growing small garden plots, similar to what we see at Hayes Farm, in order to feed their individual families, and sometimes a little bit wider of a community. But in agriculture, especially in the North American perspective, it's a hard thing to monetize. And even though these small scale farmers it's been proven, are the ones that indeed feed the world, it's the big agribusiness that's able to monetize agriculture and make money out of it. I wanted to go back here just for a second, just to show you the source of this one is the fairworldproject.org, in case you wanted to look for more information on that kind of thing. But the takeaway here is that the small scale farmers do indeed feed the world. But evidently, these same small scale farmers have a hard time monetizing their efforts, monetizing their farms and monetizing their work. And I have found this to be true for small scale farmers in Canada that I have worked with and beside for many years. Another interesting thing there from that UN report, I should put that back on for a second, is even though the small scale farmers are the ones kind of pushing and feeding the world, it's industrial agriculture and big agribusiness that maintains most of are able to obtain most of the subsidies from government and most of the research funds. These stats in particular come from the European Union, but I don't think they would be too different from what happens here in North America. So even though the small scale farmers are the ones feeding the world, it's big agribusiness that is able to monetize it better and able to get more subsidies out of the government because they're big business and they're too big to fail and all those kind of statements. So keeping that in mind here throughout our talk, that small scale farmers are indeed the ones that feed the world. And I had a hard time kind of wrapping my head around that at first myself, but I completely believe it from what I've seen and experienced. It is the small scale growers that are feeding more humans than the big agribusiness. But keeping that in mind, as people get into organic farming, especially here in North America, linked article, I can do that. Oh, didn't mean to do that, but that's okay. Link to article is coming up. There you go.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Yep.
So like when I lived in Ghana, I would say the city that I was living in the capital of Accra, had 3 million people. And I think 90% of the food was grown locally and sold at small markets. But all of the commercial agriculture was pretty much based in cocoa production. And the country itself had one brand of chocolate bar that they sold, and it was terrible. It was just the worst grade of chocolate. So all of the cocoa went to places, like it got processed and then it went to like Switzerland for these Swiss chocolates that cost like $75 a box. So that's the other thing, is that a lot of the commercial stuff is not producing items that are quality for your diet. And if you go to like countries that are coffee producers, they have the most garbage coffee you can imagine, right? Like it's just like instant stuff with the swizzle stick. And that's this like import or this like, yeah, it's the industrialized global food system, I guess.
And thank you, Amy. I'm glad you're joining us here. And the same is true from what I understand from reading a book called Squeezed of Florida and the orange industry. It's hard to find a #1 grade A orange in the state of Florida because it's so important to the economy. They ship them all out. And unless you have like an orange tree in your backyard, it's a hard thing to find. And so where I find though the rub, especially in Canada and North America here, and especially in my family, is when people get into organic farming and sustainable farming and all these kind of things that are trying to make a living out of it, too often, and again, this is true for my own family, too often they're trying to kind of keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. And a lot of small scale organic farms in this part of the world kind of want it both ways. They want their farm, and then they also want to live that modern kind of lifestyle. That's expensive, and it is not necessarily conducive to running a farm. And so when a lot of folks get into farming, and especially on a small scale, and want to still live that modern lifestyle and feel obligated or entitled maybe to take a vacation once, twice a year, to have that 2 cars in the driveway and all those kind of modern kind of trappings, they find that it's very difficult to do. And I'm no exception. I found it very difficult to maintain that type of lifestyle as well. And so then they start thinking about scaling up in order to make a living. And then that brings us to this here article from National Geographic. This here article, and I can share that one too. That's the National Geographic article. And this here article has some excellent, well, what National Geographic does best, has some excellent pictures of large scale organic farming that's happening in North America right now. And when you're a small scale farmer in North America and Canada, getting into this type of agriculture, this is what you're competing against. This is what's setting the price limit. A lot of your consumers, unless they're a very educated consumer, they don't see much difference between buying organic at the grocery store or going to the farmer's market and buying organic. They feel good about the word organic, and that's what they want. That's what they want to support. But when you're buying that global conventional type organic, this is kind of what you're supporting, is these like massive fields that are rather barren and covered with plastic. And processing plants that are massive. And as a small scale organic farmer, it's really hard to compete with this kind of level of, efficiency, of this kind of level of production. They're able to produce these units at quite a significant lower cost than you are. They're able to make more profit off of it than you are. And this is as the decades continue in the organic movement, this is kind of what big organic farming is starting to look like. That's an organic chicken farm. And I've been talking about organic chicken farms there in the past in a few different classes. And what the only difference between this and a conventional chicken farm is a door at the end of the barn that's open, and they're allowed to be able to go outside. And this here is like the state-of-the-art organic chicken farm, which doesn't look much different than the state-of-the-art conventional chicken farm. And there's your door at the end of the barn, and producing organic chickens. Most people, when they get into raising chicken on a small scale organic level, are not thinking of this kind of scale.
Can you scroll back up to that top picture of the lady and the chicken for a sec? It looked very Photoshopped to me. The edge, like where the edge of the barn is
Yeah.
that like, do you think that that's a legit, I don't know. It just seemed like a very convenient photo for them to put into the page, but
Yep,
sorry.
and that's your organic greenwashing there too.
Yeah.
Many organic farms, especially organic chicken farms, they won't let you onto their farms because they claim biosecurity rights. And there's definitely some truth in that. You don't want to be spreading diseases from one poultry barn to the next poultry barn, and that can be done on boots and this and that. But for the most part, to the average consumer, it just looks like they're hiding behind this biosecurity label in order to keep people off of their farms and taking pictures, except when they're like all staged and kind of Photoshoppy looking. Here is the dairy industry, or certified organic dairy industry. These little huts are where the calves are kept because the milk from mama cow is too valuable, right? They've got to hit the food industry. They got to make some money. So all these calves are fed certified organic milk replacer, which is mostly soybean based, and housed in these little huts. The male cows live, even in the certified organic world, the male cows live in these little huts, and then they are butchered. They don't even get out on green too much because then they're butchered short after as veal, because in the big industrial milk world, the male Holsteins, they just don't bulk up. There's not as much meat weight conversion as the big meat breeds of cattle is. So it makes more sense economically to butcher them as veal. And they live inside these little huts. And this is a certified organic operation. Again, though, not what a lot of people have in mind when they're buying these kind of things. Another very stagey looking shot. Big cattle operation. 1,500 cows here is what they're milking. Turkey operations. I've read about turkey operations that have actually taken down all of their trees on a 100-acre farm to have like 1 acre of turkey production because they don't want songbirds coming across and bringing disease with them. Songbirds, or many birds out in nature, out in the wild, will harbor diseases, but be okay with them. They can harbor bird flu, but doesn't affect them at all because their immunity and their immunity system is sufficient enough. But the modern white turkey has been bred to a point where it needs very specific environments in order to thrive. And these birds coming over and getting into their turkey facility can be detrimental. And I've read stories and heard from producers, this is in conventional turkey, white turkeys barns, that if a songbird gets into the barn, they just immediately cull all their turkeys because they don't want to deal with disease outbreak because their turkeys are that susceptible. And again, this is a certified organic turkey operation here we're looking at. And then you got your certified organic turkey packing plant. A lot of the big operations for poultry, in order to be profitable, will have a packing, butchering and processing and packing plant right on farm. And that way they don't have to ship their turkeys or poultry at all. And they pack them right on farm. And this is just kind of the level you're looking at. If you want to make money doing organic turkey, this is kind of where the system is pushing you towards. is this kind of level. I mean, look at in the background of this picture and all the turkeys hanging, and then all the turkeys being packaged. It's not a level that most people think about when they want to get into raising turkeys. Super interesting article. All we're doing right now is just looking at the pictures, but if you're reading the text here, what they talk about is, and again, look at all this, this is all plastic, strawberries, and being harvested with a vacuum machine here. That's an automatic strawberry picker with a vacuum attachment. So anyway, what the article is suggesting is that if you want to get into organic farming and you want to be profitable and you want to live that modern lifestyle alongside of farming, this is the scale that you need to operate at. The article suggests that the only way that farms are able to reach this scale is by partnering with corporations. They show they talk about the farming crisis here, and they show different operations that have partnered with big corporations in order to blow up their farm. I used to have a buddy that worked at Cisco in Peterborough, and he would talk about that. He would talk about going on to small kind of family farms that are producing a crop well, and Cisco would offer to buy out the farms adjacent to them so this farm can blow up and get to a size, again, with Cisco help and Cisco loans and all these kind of things, so these farms can get to this level where they're, quote unquote, profitable, and they're able to live the modern lifestyle and do an organic farm at this kind of level, if you can consider this organic farming. That's a pretty neat pick. Anyway, I should maybe get off of that, get on to something else here. So anyway, as you're getting into small scale organic farming, this is kind of whether you like it or not, these are the kind of things that you are competing against. You're looking at, this is the model, this is where agriculture is being pushed if you want to live that modern lifestyle and have a profitable organic farm. Some of you might be familiar with this website already. This here is Wilsey Equipment. Trying to clear a few things off my screen here. And there it is. Yeah, it's Wilsey Equipment. And I think they operate all over Canada. And this here, I just wanted to put this up as an example of the kind of things that that kind of farming model is pushing you towards. And if you are interested in kind of going down that model and getting to that next step and that next level, you guys are familiar with this level that we operate at here, where when it comes to like harvesting like baby cut salad greens, we're doing it by hand and by scissors. We don't have a vacuum machine for the strawberries. We're doing all that by hand. But again, if you want to be that profitable farm, the model currently is to have less labor on your farm and more equipment. And so this Wilsey Equipment sales, they'll sell you all sorts of different stuff, and it's all used equipment at that too. But this is kind of where it's pushing. And I see farms, this is like back in Ontario in that greater Toronto area. I've seen a lot of small farms invest in some of these equipment and have these different packing rooms and this kind of thing. Because it's hard if you're trying to, this here is a clamshell packer for cherry tomatoes. And if you want to make that modern type of lifestyle in agriculture, and you're growing cherry tomatoes, this is kind of where you get pushed. If you're growing enough cherry tomatoes, the people that are receiving them don't want to receive them loose. They want them packaged and ready to sell. And so you're looking at things like these clamshell packing equipment, or a $35,000 garlic peeler. And that gets you to that, that value added kind of level, where that's kind of where you're being pushed. And, there's also a $450,000 stainless steel French fry cutter. There's all sorts of different equipment here that can be purchased on a used level. But again, I really love the level that we work at Hayes Farm, the artisanal kind of hand kind of level. And when you look at that statement about farmers feeding the world, that's the level people are farming at. This is when you look at these kind of levels, wherever, oh, I already closed that window, the National Geographic pictures kind of levels. That's where the industry and the big agribusiness is kind of pushing you towards. When we had Darren on here earlier as a guest speaker, he was mentioning that the agribusiness is claiming 95% of farms' gross income in some cases. And that's where all this is going towards, is all this big equipment, all these big farms with these massive kind of equipment and massive kind of scales. And these are all just like giant barriers to entry for small scale organic farmers trying to make a decent living on their farm. But then again, it's the small scale farmers that are feeding the world. They're just having a tough time monetizing it. Okay, so moving from there and kind of pivoting on and going on down this path a little bit further. I wanted to kind of bring up my experiences of running Grassroot Organics. And later on into August, we'll have a talk on what's called the State of the Family Farm, where we invite in different guest speakers from local farms around New Brunswick here, and just kind of talk about where they're at with their family farm and how they're doing with it. And we'll talk a little bit of economics there as well. But I wanted to share my experiences with Grassroot Organics. So Grassroot Organics, we started that in 2001. It was on a 100-acre farm that was owned by my partner's family. And we just rented a 10-acre field. Well, and a little bit more besides that. We were probably, including the livestock pasture, probably managing about 12 acres around there. When we first started out, my wife and I were both working off farm full time and then managing the farm full time. It was about 2005 where I started that co-op, Kawartha Ecological Grower Co-op. That wasn't a co-op. I managed it as a co-op, but it was a sole proprietorship because I didn't want to get into a whole lot of paperwork. I still kind of feel like that. But my heart's in co-ops. It really is. And so anyway, we started off both working off farm full-time jobs. Then I was able to get this co-op running, and essentially then I was managing a full-time co-op business and a full-time farm, and I did that for a few years. Then I sold the co-op business to my co-workers and then refocused on the farm. That was about 2011 when we sold when that Kawartha Ecological Growers was sold, and the refocus on the farm. And so I just kind of wanted to highlight what my kind of like day-to-day, week-to-week kind of lifestyle was then, which was quite busy. So on Mondays I would try to take off. However, I would still have a crew on the farm. And so when you work from home and you have a crew on the farm, and even though you're trying to take the day off, you often get sucked into different tasks and quick little questions that turn into hour-long little projects, trying to help somebody get past an obstacle or whatever it happened to be. Maybe a piece of equipment broke down and they just came to ask your advice. Anyway, so my days off on Monday were kind of half-ish days off. And that's nothing new with the small scale family farm. When you live and work at your own operation, it's hard to take like a true day off, especially when you have livestock too. If you're looking at livestock, like every day of the week, you got to look after your livestock, often twice a day, if not 3 times a day. You can't have more people to switch that out. But anyway, taking a day off is a tricky thing to do on a farm. So we would run a small crew on the farm. We had 1 full-time worker, a couple of part-time workers, plus my wife and I. And then, as with a lot of small scale farm operations, our kitchen was also the lunch area. So even if you're taking a day off, you're still involved in the whole damn thing. And then on Monday evenings, Laura would take off and do a CSA in a small town of Lindsay, real close to us. And so, yeah, again, even though I had a day off, so to speak, I was getting sucked into different things and still offering and helping Laura out to pack up and go out to town to do the CSA. Then on Tuesdays and Wednesdays were good like farm work days, and I needed to get those good farm work days in because on Thursdays and Fridays, that was all about harvesting for market. We did a year-round market, and almost every Thursday or Friday was spent prepping for that market. We would sell quite a bit on the market, which is great. It really did us well, but in order to sell quite a bit, there's a lot of prep that needs to get done. So my only like really like good like farm work days were on Tuesday and Wednesday. And you better believe I try to pack it in on Tuesday and Wednesday and get all those kind of job done. Then Thursday, I was saying, is mostly would set to market prep and harvesting, and Friday as well, loading the truck into the evening. And I used to have a plug-in refrigeration unit, so we used to be able to plug in the truck and leave it loaded overnight, which is a game changer, by the way, because previously I didn't have that. And so we would have to get up early on Saturday morning. I'm talking like 3, 4 a.m. early, and pack the truck for market out of the cooler and then drive down. So having a plug-in for the truck was a game changer. I was able to sleep in a little bit more on Saturday morning. But nonetheless, my market started at 6:30 in the morning on Saturdays. So I was trying to be up and out of the house at about 4:30 on Saturday mornings. So I would drive down to market on Saturdays into Toronto. And then I would set up my crew at market. They're usually Laura's cousins. And then I would handle all the big orders early from any farmer market customers that were like, you know, the serious customers. They would always come like right early at the market, and I would handle the big orders, set up my crew real well, and then I would be out and go do restaurant deliveries around the city, and that would take me most of the day. I would be back at market for 2 o'clock for pack up, and then still I would get out and probably do a few more restaurant deliveries after markup too, after pack up for market, that is. And then on Saturdays, even though I left at 4:30 in the morning, sometimes I wasn't home till about 6 or 7 in the evening. And then Sunday, I would turn around and do it all over again. Sunday market started a little bit later, so I didn't need to leave until about 6 a.m. in the morning. But then again, I'd be at market, set up a crew, do some other deliveries, kind of come back and pack up from market. And so that was my weekend. Then Mondays, I try to sleep a little bit, but get sucked into farm life a little bit. And then again, Tuesday, Wednesday, full farm work days. Thursday, Friday, you'd be packing for market again, and the whole damn thing keeps going. And basically, that's how I spent most of my spring, summer, and falls from about 2011 to 2017. And I enjoyed it, don't get me wrong. Everything I did in that time, I was enjoying it. But boy, it is a bit of a grind. And talking with other folks that are outside of agriculture, family, and this and that, they just didn't quite relate, hey? They just didn't quite know what that was kind of like. And so it's hard to do that or maintain that kind of pace over the years inside of a wider society that just doesn't understand that kind of dedication to a farm and a farm business. And then that was like my spring, summer, and falls. In the winter, I would do a whole lot of planning. And then I was also teaching part-time at Fleming College there in the Sustainable Agriculture Department. And so that was my lifestyle there from in Ontario, pretty busy and working real hard in order to keep that family farm going. Now, in hindsight, I think a bit of the rub there too is, and I was getting at this earlier, is that desire to kind of run and live a modern type lifestyle within that small scale farming economics and that small scale farming lifestyle, really. And at that same time, when I was running my Kawartha Ecological Grower Co-op, I was also talking with and doing a lot of business with Amish folk. And that was a good eye opener for me because they lived a different lifestyle, right? I've been talking about trying to keep up with a modern lifestyle, but that Amish community, they live well like Amish folk. They set up horses, set up cars. You're talking like horses and buggies. They did have farm equipment, but it was all ground-driven farm equipment behind the horses. And they didn't go for those, didn't feel entitled to go for those vacations in the year, and they didn't feel, they didn't have the vehicles in the driveway. And mostly they didn't leave their farm, which is interesting because a lot of folks feel, especially at that small scale level, that they got to be present, him or herself, at the farmer's market in order to make as much money as they can. They got to go do those restaurant sales in person. And that's the route I was taking as well. But a lot of my Amish farmers never left the farm too much. They had different outlets for their produce, and they would all either arrange to have it shipped or their customers would come and pick it up. And it was very interesting anyway to see that kind of a different lifestyle approach to the small scale sustainable agriculture kind of lens. So my point here though right now is that it is very possible to make a living in small scale organic farming. And in Ontario, I was supporting a family of 5 doing that, me and my wife. She was working at the farm full time too. But it is a bit of a grind and many sacrifices need to be made along the way. And at the time, a lot of them seem like little sacrifices for greater good, but they kind of accumulate over time, right? And it's hard to keep up with your non-farming family and peers. And, you know, my kids would go to school and see all their peers with their different high-tech devices. And, I mean, you know, they want all those little googly devices and they want all these different things that their kids are doing. They hear about their friends going to Disneyland every spring and these kind of things. And, you know, it's hard to live a modern lifestyle within that small scale organic kind of farming business. But of course, on the other hand, we also had some super cool land-based farming experiences on the farm. But, you know, to kids, especially young kids, they're not as shiny and seductive as that trip to McDonald's is. You know, even though we have a kick-ass fishing pond at the farm and woods out back and these kind of things, it's not what their friends are doing. And so you always have this, I always felt I was on this bit of a tightrope between the kind of like 2 different worlds. And I like the idea of living alternative lifestyle. But then again, you know, you still have your family and your friends and all these kind of stuff that are part of the modern kind of world. And you got to kind of, sometimes you feel a bit kind of keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. And then at Grassroot Organics, we did things, and I've talked about this before, that to me, I kind of, you know, maybe regret a little bit, but they were profitable for the farm. And we're talking about that plastic use and laying that black agricultural plastic, kind of similar to some of those photos that we saw in the National Geographic, but on a much smaller scale. And then fossil fuel use with tractors. I started out at Grassroot Organics very much on this kind of scale that we practice at Hayes Farm, raised beds and heavy mulch and this kind of stuff. But then we moved to more tractor farming, and it was profitable. We were doing all right, but again, it's not where my heart was. And so that's, you know, that precipitated my move over here to Hayes Farm. And then so the best thing though about running that Kawartha ecological grower business was the community and networking with other organic farmers in the area, not just the Amish community, but other organic farmers in similar situations as myself. And because a lot of times farming can be lonely. You don't, you know, especially if you're really focused on your own particular farm. You know, it's nice to be able to communicate with other farms and find out, you know, is it just me? Am I managing my farm in the wrong way, like somehow? But then as I network with my organic farming peers in the area, I find that they're facing much the same situations. They have much the same frustrations as I have, much the same schedules that I have. And then you start to think, you know, maybe it's bigger. Maybe there's a systematic problem here. And it doesn't seem to be like as hard as you want to work and as many hours as you want to put in doesn't equate to profit all the time on a small scale organic farm. Because you're also competing against those big giant farms and all those obstacles and all those barriers to entry that we are kind of that we started with here. So then eventually I came to a conclusion that, you know, I could keep kind of going at it the way I was, or I could try something new. And then I loved what was happening here at the Hayes Farm and what I was reading about and what I was communicating with. And then that's where the idea of that nonprofit community farm, that little seed started to grow in my head. But, you know, maybe it's not me as a farmer. Maybe it's the system that I'm trying to fight against that is the bigger problem. And maybe a nonprofit community farm can help address some of these problems. And so that is where my heart still is today as a potential solution for small scale organic growers. And that's what we're talking about today, is that those solutions for small scale organic growers. And I think the nonprofit community farm stands to be an excellent solution for small scale organic growers. Now, about a month ago now, Claire joined us for a talk on managing a prosperous community farm. And we discussed many different questions there at that time, like what does a prosperous community farm look like? And can you have a prosperous farm and respect the environment at the same time? And what is profitable and what is prosperity anyway? So we hashed out a lot of those different talks there with Claire. And so we went through kind of how Hayes Farm works financially. We're not able to make enough produce or profit off produce to float Hayes Farm, obviously. So we rely on a lot of different external funding, but we also offer a lot of value here above and beyond our produce. The green space in the city, space for people to come and learn skills, a place to educate, a place to inspire. And there's a lot more value to Hayes Farm and a community farm than just the things that they are producing. And to me, I really see the community farm as an essential service to the community it serves. And obviously we're not there yet, but I mean, if you have a community farm that's producing vegetables for its local community, providing training opportunities, providing green space inside of an urban center, and just, you know, to me, it seems like a very essential service to the community it serves. However, we haven't had exactly the uptake from the rest of the government levels on that yet. But Edee's got a great book that talks about that. She'll probably bring that up in a minute. So besides for the community farm, the nonprofit community farm, that is, you know, I don't like just like one size fits all type solutions. I think diversity is key for optimal growth. So then the question is, what else can we think of that could be potential solutions for small scale organic growers other than just the community farm solution? So right now, well, recently anyway, the New Brunswick government has put out a local food and beverage strategy. And I want to bring that up on screen here real quick. That's it. The local food and beverages strategy. This was new this year. And in this document, they outline different ways of how they want to help small scale growers, not just organic growers, of course, but they want to help the small scale ag and small scale local food and beverage businesses grow their farms. And as you can see, Hayes Farm is on the cover of this. And Hayes Farm is also on, well, let me see if I can get there, is on the back cover too. There, that's us here as well. And so we're on here twice. So that's not such a bad thing, right? So inside,
even, I think there's a market picture in the middle there from year one.
Well, there we go.
Julia, you might be in that one actually, if it's the picture I'm thinking.
So inside this local food and beverage strategy, they talk about different ways to grow NB's food and beverage businesses, including farms, different ways to increase buying power in NB, in different ways that to feed the province of New Brunswick. This is all available online. You guys can probably find this easy enough if you're just to Google the title here. So I just wanted to mention a couple of takeaways from this. Inside this local food and beverage strategy, I'm looking for a stat here in my notes. There we go. So they say right now, New Brunswick is far from self-sufficient in many different categories. We are only producing 7% of the vegetables that are consumed in New Brunswick are produced in New Brunswick. That's only 7%. Fruit is 32%. Veal and beef is at 45%. Grains, pork is at 22%. Anyway, they have all these things different outlined. But the vegetable ones is what we grow here at Hayes Farm. And the vegetable ones, only 7% of vegetables here in New Brunswick are produced in New Brunswick. That is consumed here. But the stat on potatoes is like through the roof. It's like 1,800% like over what we consume is produced here in New Brunswick. And so anyway, they talk about, especially in that Feed New Brunswick part, they talk about how we can be more self-sufficient, and they offer different incentives from the government in order to achieve that self-sufficiency. And one of these incentives is this fella here that recently got a grant or a loan or some sort of businessy kind of thing. Edee is the one that pointed this out to me just yesterday or the day before. Creddle's Corner Market, which is in just outside of St. John's in Hampton. And they received they're the first ones to receive something from this fund, and they received $134,000 to help them procure goods from small scale farms in New Brunswick and then sell them at their store. So, you know, that's something. It's not a bad initiative. They have $1.5 million set aside for this, and this here is the first loan put out, or I'm not sure if it's a loan, received funding anyway, is what they say. Probably a grant, I imagine. So yeah, that's you know, that's New Brunswick strategies, trying to put money into infrastructure to support these kind of things, the funding of local food movement here, and the government is hoping that by supporting the infrastructure, then the farms can scale up to supply these different outlets that are being funded and opened up. You know, and as far as solutions for small scale growers, having more market is not such a bad thing at all, right? Overall, though, I don't want to talk much about the local food and beverage strategy, but overall, it is kind of lacking in targets a little bit. You guys can go through it there on your own time if you want to know more about it. This here first example of Creddle's Corner Market example, $134,000 investment is good, and I'm glad that they got it. I'm glad that something's going on. But you know, we're in comparison to those big organic farm pictures that we were just looking at. It's literally just a little drop in the bucket, right? So what are some more solutions there? That was a government solution that I wanted to present, which, you know, is what it is.
I have some background information on that.
Yeah, please.
Story. So, like at the sort of height of the early pandemic, when people were super panicked about food supply, that fellow was on a call, and he was basically saying that oftentimes they'll get produce from Nova Scotia, because if they want apples and they call the Annapolis Valley, like down in the valley, they'll say, well, we don't have enough, but no problem. Give me 5 hours and I'm going to call around and we'll put a shipment together and we'll send them to you. But he said in New Brunswick, even if something's like 30 kilometers away, people will show up with stuff at in the back of their truck and come at any time of day, because, you know, people only want to take stock in at certain times of day usually. And he said they'll just have a handwritten invoice and they'll want cash on demand. And so as a purchaser, if those are your two options, it's always easier and faster to go the route and have a co-op or whatever supply. So I found it a little bit ironic that there would be $134,000 to help these people buy local food, but I'm wondering if there's any money put into helping farmers actually organize their business strategy so that they could do online invoicing, and then that they could collaborate on supply chain better. And that's why I kind of see this wonky thing, because the Creddle's Market, they own Mrs. Dunster's donuts. So they're factory owners. So it's actually pretty easy for them to get money. But for the people that are delivering to them, it seems to be so much harder to get the money.
And that's great. That's a couple of places I was steering this conversation here. Is one, this is something Dallas and I were just talking about the other day, is it's much easier to obtain funding from government or banks if you already have money. And so that is a good illustration of that point there. If they are factory owners and they own Dempsters there, they probably already have access to these kind of things. And therefore, that just seems to be where the money goes to, is folks that already have it. Yeah, it's easier to get a loan from the bank if you don't need the loan. You know, it's just it's the irony of the whole thing. And then the other point there too is that rarely, and especially in this local food and beverage strategy, it's not mentioned at all. Rarely does any of these fundings go to farmers. Government often tries to support different businesses and different industries that in theory is going to offer some spin-off to farmers as far as more markets to expand their businesses and this and that. You know, and I can see some sort of logic in that. But after seeing that, like for decades, like that's the farmers rarely get money directly from the government. But things like these types of businesses, and Amy was mentioning like farm business consulting and accountants and farm accountants, that is, those will receive money from the government in order to help farmers, but rarely does that money go directly to the farmers to decide for themselves what they need for their business for themselves. And you would think that farmers would have a good idea of what their business needs, as opposed to the government supporting these external businesses to support these farmers. And rarely have I seen that kind of trickle down theory work out for farmers in the long run. But I wanted to
question.
Yep.
I'm always kind of thinking of things from like an advocacy like perspective. And I know the NFU is like the main, or I think is like one of the main advocacy branches. I also acknowledge that advocacy takes hours that farmers don't have. Like, are there other advocacy groups like around, like I know there's like big like slow food and stuff, but like are there other groups working on this? Because like I feel like so much of this is like needs to be targeting the public with education and then also targeting government. So like things like what Amy's saying, so like the government actually or the government money actually goes where it's most needed. Sometimes government isn't aware of that or they choose to ignore it. So I'm just interested, like, are there other kind of activist or advocacy organizations other than NFU working on this stuff? Because it doesn't seem like the farmers would have time, but it sounds like it needs to happen.
Amy or Claire, is any I don't got many answers for this one.
So the NFU in New Brunswick, it's one of two what they call general farm organizations. So it's actually a provincially mandated kind of body that exists in the province that represents farmers. The other one is the Agricultural Alliance. So they're like from a government perspective, kind of parallel organizations, but have quite a different approach and quite a different membership one from the other. And to my knowledge, the Ag Alliance is only provincial, whereas the NFU has a national backing. So we don't have much capacity at the provincial level, but nationally, like there's a lot of effort and some really, really noble, causes and perspectives that we kind of lean on. So I'm glad that you have that perspective of the NFU. And I think there's other groups that kind of work in the same realm, but the government isn't really, like the government has to listen to both the NFU and the Ag Alliance. But these other organizations, they're kind of like, well, if you can get your foot in the door kind of thing. And I'm thinking specifically like, I don't know, the first one that comes to mind is the Food for All New Brunswick, which is a network of organizations and people that are kind of working in the realm of food in the province. Yeah, hopefully that helps give a little bit of context. Okay, good.
Thanks.
I am all in favor of that kind of education piece, and I got a good example of something I want to share. But before I get there, and I'm kind of running out a little bit of time on my piece, but I wanted to present a few more possible solutions here for small-scale organic farmers. One is the formation of co-ops. And La Ferme Partagée there is a good example of that. There's also really local harvest. Récolte Chez Nous is another one here in New Brunswick as well. And I think co-ops could address this, like worker-owned co-ops. Johnny Seeds in Maine, who we've had up on our website, on our page here, looking at their website. There's a worker-owned co-op. And I think those are really good models for potential for farms to be able to diversify their people on the farm, which I think is a good thing, and get more humans on the farm and more people invested in the farm in order to achieve that kind of higher level in order to be more profitable. But still, you're kind of still going down that same path of trying to live that modern lifestyle and have that old-timey kind of feel of a farm. And there's always a little bit of a rub between that. But co-ops could be an example of that anyway, of a solution for small-scale organic growers. But to address that rub that I keep talking about between that modern lifestyle and that pastoral type farm that people want to have, myself included, there are like intentional living communities out there. And when I was doing a little bit of research, I found a great tool for that. Intentional living communities. There's a whole map, Foundation for Intentional Community. There's a whole map online and about different intentional living communities that exist across North America. I had it there zoomed in. I was just checking to see if the farm this is a farm in Tennessee I used to work at, and they are on the map. So I have some experience there at intentional. They used to call themselves an eco village there at the Summertown, Tennessee farm. But there are several of these, many of them across Canada as well, and some even listed here in the Maritimes. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's here if you guys want to poke around a bit more. That is the Foundation for Intentional Community. And basically, a lot of different intentional communities will live a slightly different lifestyle in order to have more time available to focus on homesteading and farming and self-sufficiency and feeding the community and all those kind of good stuff. And this is something I explore on a regular basis. I had a good experience there down in Tennessee. I like the little thing they got going in South Knowlesville. There is another one here in New Brunswick. There is one out on the islands in Vancouver called Lesquetty Island. And apparently they have set up basically a cashless society out on Lesquetty Island. But these things are all kind of like very alternative, right? These are kind of like almost kind of dropping out of society type things. But maybe that's what's needed a little bit. Maybe we need an alternative. Maybe we need some reform to our present lifestyles that would be more congruous to living that sustainable small scale organic farming lifestyle. Which takes me to my next point here. And I want to share a little bit of this here with you, is the agricultural reform that happened down in Cuba. Now, I find this absolutely fascinating. And let's see if we can get this here online. Cuba, not too long ago, hang on, gotta clear stuff off my screen here. Cuba, not too long ago, from what I understand, we're living a lifestyle that wasn't too much different than the average North American lifestyle. Yeah, let me see if I can get this going. This was like back in the times when the Soviet Union was still a thing. They were trading heavily with the Soviet Union. Much of their agriculture was very conventional agriculture. This here podcast can explain it better than I can. I just want to make sure my audio is shared. There we go. Got that figured out now. And we'll listen to this here for a few minutes. They explain it better than I can.
Mark, I don't think we're getting the audio.
Nothing?
No.
Ah, man.
It's just a little murmur.
Let me try that again. Let me stop that. This is really good. I really like this Cuban example because it's a real world example of agriculture reform. And that's where okay, let's try this again. It's a really good real world example of agricultural reform. And besides for like the community, nonprofit community farm model, which I think is fantastic and I think works well within our present economic capitalist democracy kind of system, this agricultural reform I think is another great example, but a little bit further removed from us anyway. It took something huge in Cuba to make this happen. And so we'll try this
around
again. Let me
local
know
food
if you
sustainability
can.
and always was around gardens.
We were just cooking lunch.
Go
Come on.
in Cuba. This may help you, friends, put that little gap.
Food, thank you very much. Here we are. The more the pandemic endures, the more I keep thinking back to Cuba, because here we are. Many of us have begun to see some of the fragilities in our own food system. Like, I think people in Cuba would never have seen coming what came. You know, it seemed like everything was quite fine, thank you very much. And I think we're the same. We have a very naive sense of security in our own global food system. And the reality is we are so utterly dependent, most of us, not all of us, but most of us, on food imports coming in from all over the world, certainly from outside of our region in most cases. Was pretty convinced at that point. You know, I kind of picked up to get back transformation
recently,
and basically
Cuba go through this big change. Why are they so special? Tell us about that.
Well, sometimes people look at what happened in Cuba and what is happening in Cuba as a laboratory for the rest of the world. And basically, Cuba was thrust into a circumstance where they were cut off from the global food system. And this happened in the early 90s, first of all, with the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the Eastern Bloc. I mean, Cuba had converted its agricultural economy into largely export, growing commodity crops like sugar, tobacco, citrus. And there was always some sort of subsistence farming going on, but not a lot. And Cuba was completely dependent on cheap food imports from Eastern Europe to feed their population. So two things happened. I mean, the Eastern Bloc fell apart, so all of those imports dried up, and not only the food imports, but all of the agrochemicals and machinery and other agricultural inputs that they were dependent on. And then at the same time, the United States strengthened and tightened the embargo, the economic embargo against Cuba. So Cuba became very food insecure, and this happened in a 6-month period. So people were lining up for food. I mean, there were serious food issues. People were losing weight. Yeah, very complex and crazy time for Cubans, very hard. Yeah, so what did they do in response? I mean, of course, the US politically was hoping that it would be the end of the socialist experiment. But Cuban socialism is very nationalistic, and most Cubans are very proud of what they have, and they complain about it too. And it's not perfect, of course, but they do have a lot of resourcefulness, and they have an amazing education system, especially in the sciences. So in the late 80s, they gathered many of the agricultural scientists together and said, basically, okay, how are we going to feed this population? You know, we don't have our imports anymore. We don't have our imports for feeding animals or for fertilizing. And in fact, Cuba at the time was using more chemicals per acre than the United States was. It was very, very dependent on chemicals. And that was a result of the aid from the Soviet Union. So they brought all of their smartest people together and they devised a whole set of solutions, one of which was conversion from chemically based agriculture into what the term they use in Cuba is agroecology. So it's organics, and it's, you know, developing soil fertility on site rather than depending on inputs for it, using animals instead of tractors, and using manures, of course. Lots of other kinds of pretty standard organic techniques like crop rotation and natural pest controls, etc. So This was developed very rigorously, and they created all kinds of public learning centers around the country where farmers could train. They had massive opportunities for people that wanted to farm to get land for free. So, and
Wow.
they prioritized land in and around cities closest to where the population was. So people could petition to the state and get unused land, plus some training and some initial capital for seeds and tools and basics that they needed. And they had a whole new generation of small farmers that started to emerge. With that was also the development of an urban agriculture stream, in which within the heart of some of their biggest cities, including Havana and Santiago and other cities, folks got land that might have been, quarter of an acre, and created really viable commercial businesses out of these, using, interestingly, much the same techniques that John Jevons advocates in the biointensive method, which is slightly raised beds that are about 4 feet wide and 25 or 30 feet long, high inputs of organic matter. So there's lots of organic waste in Cuban cities from animals and rice production, sugarcane refinement, etc. So making those organic waste products available to farmers. And yeah, people started growing food and selling it within their communities where they lived. And it was a huge change for Cuba, massive change. And it meant that people started to get the calories they needed. And it even changed the diet, because there weren't a lot of vegetables in the Cuban diet before that. People just did not really eat. It was really a meat and potatoes kind of place. Yeah, very, very fascinating. So the concept of salads, for example, salad greens, that was completely new, and people needed to be really be sort of educated into how to use all kinds of new foods that were appearing in the city markets and right at the points of sale by these small farms. They invented a word in Cuba for these small urban farms, and it's called organoponicos, which is an organic farm. So it's against the law to use chemicals in these little commercial ventures within Cuban cities. And yeah, high inputs of organic matter. So really quite an amazing thing to see. So the first time that I went there, I was just gobsmacked by what the ingenuity of folks and how they were able to create very productive systems in cities with very few outside inputs.
Oh.
Yeah.
So very interesting podcast. It's there if you ever want to look into it a bit more. But I want to wrap up here just by saying that those organic panicos there in Cuba sound a lot like what we're doing here at Hayes Farm, does it not? The difference is the government got behind and supported it because it was almost a matter of life and death. And the government was the one that educated the population about how to transition from a meat and potatoes diet to a local greens farm-based kind of diet. And that's what we're missing here. Right now in our present society, our present system, it's the small scale organic farmers that are trying to do the education piece, and they can't. They need that government, or they need another body in order to help move things along. And that agrarian and land reform piece, I think, is just fascinating. And I think that is a solution for small scale organic farmers. But at our present moment, we're far away from that. But I think that is another potential solution there. Now, I want to pivot here and allow Edee some time here to talk about another potential solution for small scale organic growers, and that is dealing with alternative economies. And so, Edee, the floor is yours.
Sure. Am I able to share my screen?
Not yet, but give me 1 second. Yes, you are.
There she is. So can everyone see the slide presentation?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I've lost you guys again. I'm slow at this. What an exciting conversation. And I wanted to bring it back down to what we're trying to do. I mean, the whole, again, Mark, what you said about the community farm model that we have happening at Hayes is really, I think we're in an excellent position. We're actually leading a lot of places in Canada in terms of what our concept is, and this whole concept around maximizing our impact in the community versus this old diatribe of maximizing profit. And we had this wonderful infographic done for us a couple of years back, and it sort of showed the holisticness of what this does. The fact that not only are we feeding people, but we bring in all the different elements. We're dealing multiple crises that we have right now in our society. Certainly climate change, a big thing. Our health, talking about the diet, where you mentioned, we're importing about 95% of our food, and a lot of that is super refined. People just aren't knowledgeable or have access to fresh food, so we can impact health. We can challenge the way that the income and economy is being dealt with right now, which I think is brilliant. The education piece, like you said, even though we are funded, the majority of our funding is through grants. It's this education piece. That's the value added that we bring to the community, is that, we can bring together such an amazing group of people to be able to do knowledge sharing, which is fantastic. And then from the community perspective, again, all the different ways that the community can participate in what we're actually trying to achieve. Now, sort of our vision has always been to sort of the mantra, or the three-legged stool, is that we're human scale, regenerative, and relationship based. And I think people are starting to recognize that. And you mentioned Credles getting that grant to do that sort of food distribution hub. But I can share with the group here, although we're supposed to keep it on the down low in terms of a public announcement, but our provincial Department of Agriculture has also funded us this year for $76,000, which is amazing, because I think what they're seeing is when the pandemic hit, I think a lot of cracks in our existing systems showed up big time. And I know from an agricultural perspective, there was that huge scramble, that whole temporary foreign workers, allowing them in or not allowing them in. A lot of farmers were left without the labor that they needed. And our premier thought, well, no problem, we'll just, get New Brunswickers to show up in the field and help out. And that failed miserably, simply because agriculture has always been sort of seen as a, sort of the kiddie table, like it was never a bright, shining, glossy, high-tech kind of solution to what's going on in our world. But now they've realized, even with the CERB, introducing the CERB, finding ways that people can get into agriculture if they're being funded. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I think we have a struggle still, because the feds, the federal government, is still very much export focused. But with the pandemic, again, because of the restrictions that have been put on so many things, I think our world is getting smaller and smaller. So one of the things I wanted to share with you, and this just came on my radar like a week ago, is that there's this amazing book out there, and it's called A Small Farm Future: Making the Case for a Society Built Around Local Economies, Self-Provisioning, Agricultural Diversity, and a Shared Earth. And it's been written by this amazing fellow named Chris Smage. He's from the UK, so he writes a lot from England's situation currently. But his book actually recognizes that, much like the infographic we have for Hayes, that he actually outlined 10 crises that have kind of converged in our world right now. And those 10 are population, climate, energy, soil, stuff, meaning consumerism, water, land, health and nutrition, and political economy and culture. So he sees these 10 crises all coming together, and just really, seeing the collapse of a lot of systems, or the sort of the cracks in the foundations of these monetary systems, capitalism in general. And he is a great proponent of, again, reform, but around, again, this community farm aspect, that he thinks that what's going to happen very quickly is, the economies are going to fail, and that the way forward is for us to develop our places based on a agricultural farm. And I have a quote out of his book. He has one chapter called "The Return of the Peasant," and his quote is, "It has to start with the recognition that some people do actually want to be peasants. They want to recapture the garden, and their numbers are likely to increase." So he really sees this paradigm shift in the populace, that people, I mean, when the pandemic hit, the first thing people did was they rushed the seed companies and the nurseries to start their gardens. And I think millennials in general are into the sharing economy and getting back to the land. It's a huge movement. And so he's written this book. It's kind of a heavy read. His background is he's a social scientist, but he's come up with all these amazing examples of what's wrong in our current systems, and then goes on to talk about how he feels that this small farm future is the way forward. He does give caveats about that there's going to be some behavioral modification. And I think, Mark, you spoke about this modern lifestyle, the modern world. And he says his thinking is that, our current modern world is based on this huge, fast, interconnected, highly technological paradigm. And he says that the problem is that people think that to get out of the problems that we currently have, that it's going to require a huge, fast, interconnected, highly technological solution. And he says that's where people are wrong-headed, that in fact, what we have to do is simplify, which is pretty exciting. I can't see you guys, so I have to try and find a way to get you, because I can't. It's awful working in the dark here.
I agree. It's a Zoom restriction for sure.
Is there any, there's no way
You can get little thumbnails up.
Yeah. Lord. Anyway.
Yeah, sometimes you have to set it up, and I can't quite remember to watch.
Okay,
Just
just yell out.
In your top corner, there should be an icon that says view. Do you see that? And then you can select.
While Edee's figuring this out, something I always say to my kids there when they're complaining that we don't live a normal lifestyle is that the rest of the world is not living a normal lifestyle. But to children, that is all they've grown up with, and that's what seems normal to them. But the lifestyle our world is presently in is not normal. There's nothing normal about it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Oh, now I lost you guys again. Okay, I have to advance the slide. I have no choice. Either I have your faces, your beautiful faces, or I have to advance the slide. I wanted to, I'm just going to go back to the fella. It's amazing. So I've only had like a couple of days to skim his book, but what he sees is that he really thinks that we have to get back to that, and he calls it an artisanal economy. So basically, not only do we need to bring back the farmers, but all these other wonderful guild type crafts, things like bringing back, and he used it, I guess, being from England, he says a lot of the last names of English people reflect sort of what guild they were in. So things like bringing back the Smiths and the Carters and the Coopers and the weavers and the tanners and thatchers. But he said he'd like to throw in electricians and plumbers now as well. But his vision is that he says that right now mainstream thinking is that for poor people to increase their autonomy, to be able to be more self-reliant, the thinking is that we need to raise our wages. And he thinks that actually the best way for poor people to increase their autonomy is to give them bigger gardens. So he really, really sees the move towards farming and gardening and self-reliance, this idea of being able to feed your family, which is a huge portion of someone's weekly budget, that he sees that this is really going to save our souls. So with the idea of talking about poor people, I wanted to just talk a bit about poverty. And I'm going to see once more, just while I'm here, maybe I can get your faces. There you are, you're back. Yay. Okay, hello everyone. So poverty manifests in many different ways. And typically when we talk about poverty, the first thing people think about is financial poverty, obviously. The fact that, when you talk about a poor person, that person does not have the financial means in order to be able to live well in this society. But there's many different kinds of poverty that we have out there in addition to financial. There's poverty of well-being and mental health. So even if you are financially fluent, you could be suffering from many aspects of well-being or mental health. We're all suffering from poverty of a clean environment. Poverty of social inclusion, finding where you belong. A lot of us, I think more and more, and especially when the pandemic hit, that there's more and more misfits that are people are realizing that, they may have just been going through the motions and that suddenly they feel like they just don't belong with what's going on in society right now. There's poverty of knowledge. As far, here at Hayes, we really don't think that knowledge should be bought or sold. We really want to make sure that it is openly shared. But unfortunately, if you want to go to university or even ourselves, we charge a tuition, and that's just to be able to fund ourselves. But essentially, there is poverty of knowledge because it's a elitist access. And then ultimately poverty of spirit. If you bring a culmination of all of this, again, part of that belonging or feeling interconnected is very prevalent. So when I look at all of these things, sort of came up with a phrase called poverty of purpose. And I think this is global. This is all of humanity is currently suffering from poverty of purpose. The idea that we have, the way that the society is structured right now is it's very difficult for us to pursue our purpose because of a number of things. But in my personal philosophy, I really bring it down to money. So, having said that, I want to talk a bit about money. The way the monetary system works right now, you basically, in order to do what you really want to do, or even to survive, you need to have money. And so it's this weird thing, this sort of abstract concept that you can't just live your life. You actually have to pursue this thing in order to, once you get that thing, then you can start resolving your needs. And what money does is it creates, it's based on a false sense of scarcity. The idea is that as long as you still have to get this thing, you're without. Although there's abundance all around us, we have everything that we really need. What from my perspective, I just see that we have a distribution problem. And I actually refer to this as the weapon of mass destruction. The fact that we create a society based on scarcity. And when there's scarcity, that invokes fear. And basically we have two ways of two basic emotions that will lead us or guide us, and it's either fear or love. And with a monetary system, it invokes fear. And with fear, there's this, again, this false sense of separation that, I am alone. I'm not included. There's something wrong with me. And that's because of the competition. The idea is that there again is this false sense of competition that, we talked about big agra. And there is this concept that all of a sudden, whoever's got the money gets the money. And so there's this whole icky competitive thing that brings out the worst in us, because it puts us in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, your world gets really, really small. And you can't see beyond that. And to tell someone, like me, to speak to people and say that there is abundance, the earth provides everything that we need. It's very difficult for someone to even think that way when all they can worry about is where that next dollar is going to come from in order for them to pursue their life, to feed their kids, to keep a roof over their heads, to buy clothing, to feed themselves, all of that. So I've got a big hate on for the monetary system because I don't think it's necessary. And I also see all the things that it creates. So there is a solution, and what is happening right now is there are a lot of folks that are looking at universal basic annual income. And this is, yes, it's money, but I see it as actually just a transition tool, because ultimately I think what we should be moving towards is a gift economy, one where we have all had the opportunity to develop and figure out what our gift is, and for us to be able to, the internet allows us to connect with each other, we can find each other, but the idea is that we can share our gift. And I think that's ultimately why we're here, is to figure out what our gift is, and then for us to be able to share it. So while we're in a monetary system, the best way forward is for us to look at universal basic annual income. And this is basically a support system where it's universal. There's no questions asked. There's no sort of categorizing or questionnaires that you have to fill, or there's no means testing, nothing like that. It's basically, we just trust. And I think, Mark, you said it best, that, for farmers to get money, they know best how to spend it. Don't give me money that's only good for this, for me to buy this particular machine, or for me to develop this aspect of my farm. Just trust that, as a farmer, I'm multifaceted anyway, because, farmers are probably the most well-rounded and diverse individuals that I've ever met. Let them use the money for what they need to spend it on. So you mentioned also that farmers they provide an essential service. Everybody needs to eat. And we know with the way that the systems are collapsing right now, that we need a way to support the farmers so that they feel that no matter, the risks that they take are amazing. In addition to just the financial risk, the idea is that they're working with Mother Nature. And you can see that we had a really cold overnight. So the thing is that we're always, or farmers are always at the mercy of the elements. So there is that added risk as well. And if farming and food production and this local food and business strategy is really going to work, we have to make sure that farmers are well supported regardless of what the external stressors may be. And so I really think, and I know the NFU, the National Farmers Union, is behind this as well. The idea is that if farmers, well, basically if everybody had access to universal basic annual income, and if we look at the CERB, the CERB was what the government came up with for people who were employed. But everyone should be getting this, because work is, you've got people that are taking care of children, taking care of parents, folks that are in the gig economy, you know, musicians and artists, folks that are really struggling. We need all of that. We need, in order for us to be healthy humans, we need all of the things that we're wonderful at. But you need, in a money society, to be able to support what you want to do. So the idea behind having this basic annual income is that if everybody knows that their basic needs will be met, that narrow scarcity focus can start relaxing and start opening up and allowing people to take a breath and to take time and discover what their gift is and to pursue it without fear of something being yanked away. Yeah. So I wanted to just talk a bit about how, I mean, I guess at this point, does anybody have any questions about basic annual income or the concept of it? No.
Well,
Hearing
just to add another little wrinkle on it is just what I always think about often in the fields is if we just like got rid of money tomorrow, would folks still go to work? And I think the folks that really love their jobs would, of course, still go to work and still do their jobs. The folks that really don't like their jobs, they probably have a good reason to not like their jobs. And maybe those are jobs that need to be phased out. Now, on the other hand, when I talk about this with other folks, they always bring up things like garbage collection. Well, as soon as garbage started piling up, folks would get together and come up with a solution of how to deal with it. You know, and so to apply this to universal basic annual income, if everybody just received money in order for them to pursue the things in life that they want to pursue, I don't think the world would shut down. It would shift, it would change, but it wouldn't shut down.
Absolutely. And there have been multiple pilots that have been done that showed that people did not stop working. They may have changed what their work was or where they, you know, where they busied themselves, I guess, or contributed to society. I prefer, rather than the word work, I like to just say your contribution to society. And they found that people, in fact, they were probably more productive than they were in a job that they really disliked. And what I find really fascinating as well is that, you know, we always see this being linked to folks without, so what they consider poor people. But I can see people that perhaps are in really high-paying jobs just saying, you know, screw it. I'm walking away and I'm going to garden. I'm going to feed my family. I'm going to change my life. So I'm going to dumb it down. And we know already that we cannot, this consumeristic society, people they need to divest. We need behavioral modification to happen anyway, because the planet can't support it. So absolutely, I see that there's going to be this huge, huge shift in what is the necessary work that we need. And I think people will naturally gravitate to what their gift is. And then things like garbage collection, well, it would probably be really good if, as a community, you take your turn doing whatever garbage collection it is. But the fact that you're actually intimate with that work will make you rethink producing garbage. You know, the idea is that this whole concept, the true concept of you know, reduce, reuse, recycle, will, I think, really take hold.
Wouldn't you say too, Edee, like, I really like how you phrase it as like contribution to society, because like, I feel like some of our highest paying jobs don't actually contribute to society. It just contributes to yourself or the corporation. And so we've got this totally like flipped on its head, like the salary system or like money system. It's completely divorced from like any reality.
Most of the high-paying jobs that are out there are to support the money system. That's what it is. They were jobs that were created because the money system it's a imperfect system. We've realized that you can't have growth endless growth. It just doesn't exist. So when there's a problem, then they hire people to try and fix the problem, but you're just putting Band-Aid on Band-Aid on Band-Aid of a system that is broken, that's messed up. And the contribution thing, like you look at the work that's being done, and I'm going to share a couple of websites that will talk about it, but you know, the just at home, you know, moms nurturing their babies, that is a contribution, you know, to society that isn't being paid for. You know, they're not receiving an income to ensure that they can stay with their child and raise it and make, you know, just nurture that nurturing aspect, or whether you're taking care of your parents, or, you know, like I said, you're a musician. If that's your gift, why shouldn't you be able to thrive by sharing music with the world or art with the world? And we know the classic starving artist, because that's just, the money system does not, unless you're buying expensive art, there's no value in it. And so our whole value system has to be changed. And when you have, I've got a couple of words on here where I talked about scarcity. When you have basic annual income, and that scarcity narrow focus starts opening up, people can start seeing the abundance, and they can feel the love that we have. Because as a member of society, regardless of what you do, you know, if you want to sit in your mom's basement and play video games, maybe that's what you need in order to find your gift, you know, and that's okay. And we love you and we support you. There's inclusion, that everyone is included. Everyone has a purpose here. And, you know, if we haven't figured it out yet, it's our failing to discover why you should, you know, be considered included. It's built on cooperation as well. And you're talking again with the garbage collection. If that's the way it is, you know, let's work together, you know, rather than just hiring these people who do the garbage all the time. Maybe we should be sharing the more difficult aspects of keeping our communities going. But again, looking at one that's based on survival, which is the monetary system, versus one that is based on thrival. We want to encourage you to develop your gifts, I think is again, I looked in Chris Smage's book, and I haven't been able to see anything, just in my cursory stuff, to see anything where he talks about basic annual income. So if once I get through the book and he hasn't said anything about it, I think I'll address that with him. Like, just kind of see that I think we need a transition tool in order to really make sure that everyone's talents are being brought to the forefront. So what I wanted to do is share with you a couple of ways that you can find out more about basic income. There's an amazing group called Basic Income Canada Network. And, you know, I'm not even sure how I would play a YouTube on here. I'm not sure if it would work or not, but the idea is that if you want to find out more about how basic income can work, essentially what I would like to see, and this is, I think they're talking anywhere from like $1,000 a month to $2,000 a month, which was similar to what the CERB was, to support people. The idea is that they've come up with the different scenarios. They've done sort of costing, that kind of thing. But I really like this website or this group because they look at the inclusiveness or the social aspects of how this can help people. And there is a New Brunswick chapter. I went to one of their meetings. It was 2 years ago, but they've been kind of dormant since then. But I highly recommend that if you want to learn more about it, that you go to basicincomecanada.org, which is this website. In addition, there's another group called UBI Works, which is Universal Basic Income Works. They look at it a bit more from the, they're still looking at it from a monetary system, where a lot of CEOs have gotten together and they said, you know, this is actually good for us, because if our workers know that they're supported, then there's more money going into the economy. There's going to be more money spent, which means you can sell more products. I'm less enthusiastic about this group. However, what they do have on their website is that there was a petition that was there was a bill that that was introduced in the Parliament on February 22nd, 2021. So just this year. And this was Bill C-273. And it was, the bill is about creating a national strategy for a guaranteed basic income. So it just entered second reading on June 14th, which is good. So what I wanted to do is share with you, if you believe in this as being a really good transition tool and you haven't yet, there is a petition that you are welcome to sign and send out just to give more momentum behind, showing that the citizenry are behind this concept. So again, it's ubiworks.ca if that's something that you'd like to participate in. So again, my dream and my vision, and I've seen it, is for us to move towards a gift economy. And a gift economy is where there is no money, where basically we just all gravitate to what we do best. We trust that we've got each other's back, that we care about each other, that our needs will be met. We also, our expectations of what a good life or what wealth is will be different from what they are now, but perhaps they're there already with you. I mean, I think a lot of people that are attracted to Hayes Farm are already of that mindset. But the idea is that there are a number of groups out there that are actively talking about a gift economy. And I wanted to share this one specifically, which is the Maternal Gift Economy Movement. And they're amazing. This is global. They have, there are a lot of indigenous communities that are participating in it. A lot of speakers globally. And one thing I wanted to show you is if you do go to it, they have these amazing salons where it's basically sort of 2 hours where they get these great speakers to talk about the gift economy, the nurturing economy, the caring economy. And they really are amazing speakers. And coming up, the next one I wanted to feature is July 3rd. And they're done through Facebook or online, so they're free. Sherry Mitchell and Mi'kmaq are going to be speaking. I'm not quite sure what their topic is yet, but Sherry Mitchell is Penobscot, and she's fantastic. I know that she is very connected with the Wolastoq Grand Council, and she and Mi'kmaq, who is she's from Esconobaditch, I believe, but she's the elder in residence at STU, are both going to be talking about it. And again, there is this huge, and it's a matriarchal society as well, which I really love, is and not saying that women are better than men, but that's that concept of the feminine, the divine feminine in all of us, and it's that nurturing, that caring, making sure that no one's left behind. That's very prevalent in all of the chats that they offer. So again, I highly recommend. So it's happening. So I highly recommend that if you are interested, that they have a video archive of all their past salons of different topics. But if you go to maternalgifteconomymovement.org, you can sign up for this one that's coming up in July, as well as go through all the previous sessions that they've had, which are really quite remarkable. And the last one that I wanted to share on the gift economy is, this is a fellow, Charles Eisenstein, and he's been talking about the gift economy for well over a decade. And he's actually has a course that's on offer right now, and it's just sort of a self-study course on living in the gift. And what I really like about him is that he, states unequivocally that he's, I'm not a tree hugger sort of mystic kind of person. He says that he's a very practical, what he considers a very practical person, but he again talks about the gift and spirituality, and you can see that it says it's the personal and collective transition from an age of scarcity and separation to an age of abundance, community, and gift. So he's eloquent. He speaks so well. He has written a number of books, Sacred Economics. They're all available for free. Again, Living in the Gift. If you go to charleseisenstein.org, you can either purchase the books through the website or you can read them online for free. And as I said, he is a gifted writer and speaker, and he just simplifies very complex thoughts. And it's a wonderful read, very easy and thoughtful and thought-provoking. So I highly recommend that we start believing in this stuff. And these two websites will definitely help support your journey in discovering what the gift economy could look like. Anyway, that's kind of all that I had formally to share. So I was just, opening it up for discussion or questions. With a thumbs up, can I see how many people have heard about basic annual income? I see one thumb. Oh, yeah, good. 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 That's great. It's an odd concept because we are in a money society, and a lot of people say, well, how are we going to pay for it? All of a sudden, that's the thing. How do we pay for it? But how do we pay for supporting the Irvings? How do we pay for, subsidizing a big agra? How do we pay for it? We pay for it. It all comes out of our pockets. And the idea is that it's a shift. We have the abundance. What it is, it's just a redistribution of the wealth. And we have to trust each other that we know best. Just like Mark said with the farmer, give the farmer the money directly because they know best where to spend it. I think each and every one of us, if we are given money, and that's what these pilots have shown with basic annual income, is what people love about it is that there's no strings attached, that they can choose where the money should go, and they know best how to support their family or themselves or their community. And I think we have to, the trust is a huge thing. And there's a chapter in Chris Mage's book all around trust. And, the money system has disconnected us from each other. It's separated us so that we're suspicious of each other because we're in competition with each other because there's only this pursuit of money. And I think what we need to do is just realize that, we will, given the opportunity and the support through basic annual income, we will be able to relax and trust each other again, because we know that we don't have this black cloud behind us chasing us saying, you got to get the money first. So.
Yeah, there was a study done in Vancouver where they handed out I don't remember, it was like $5,000 or something to people who were experiencing homelessness. The one caveat was, and this is meant in a non-stigmatizing way, but the person was expected to not be living with a serious drug addiction, just because that kind of messes up your decision-making ability sometimes. But they found that folks who were given this money even saved money. And it was exactly what you're saying. They knew how to spend it. They knew where to spend it. They knew how to look after themselves. And most people, it was a small amount by North American standards, but most people not only met their needs, but also saved money. And then I think, once you have that kind of society, you're able to address the root problems that are causing things like substance use disorder that would make people maybe not be able to make those decisions. So yeah, it's interesting that at small scale, individual person, and then what you're saying, pilot studies, I'm assuming we're at a larger community or country scale have proven it too. So yeah, it's super interesting.
And if we talk about the concept of escape, so I think, Mark, you talked about sort of being able, wanting to live be a farmer, but also do that modern lifestyle and, that whole concept of a vacation, right? Well, if you have the opportunity to feel supported and pursue your purpose, it's all about escaping this drudgery or the intensity that the monetary system creates. It's escape. And so whether it's a vacation or it's shopping or it's drug addiction or it's gambling or any number of things, anything that is detrimental to our well-being, that kind of thing, or this sense of escapism, is because there's something wrong with that system. And I think if all of us were just allowed to do our thing, imagine every day you could have a little mini vacation, between 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which could be termed a nap, or, hanging out with the cat, or hanging out with your kids, or whatever. The whole concept of even our circadian rhythm could change. We wouldn't have to work 8-hour days, and kids maybe wouldn't have to have their vacation in the summertime. Maybe they could be working in the farm or would prefer doing something like that. And if we need time off from education, maybe it should be happening in the winter months. Maybe, January, February is when the kids should be dormant. We should follow that as well. We should be getting up with the sun and going to sleep with the sun. Right now we've got 16 or 15-hour days, but in the winter that gets really small again. And maybe, we should follow nature. Follow, if nature's hibernating, we should, the way we conduct society could work in that same way. But until we are all fully supported and no one's left behind, you can't create a plastic bubble. It has to be all or nothing. But I'm an optimist, and I feel that we're on our way. It's going to be tough. There's going to be a lot of changes with systems. But we've got each other's back.
And that 8-hour workday you were mentioning and the children's breaks from school is all around the economy. The reason the kids got off school in the first place for that summer break is to help out with haying on the farm, again, in order to support the farm economy. And the 8-hour day comes right out of the Industrial Revolution, where folks were taken advantage of, and then it got scaled back to an 8-hour day. But who's to say that humans are meant to be working 8 hours a day anyway? It's just all to fit this economy model.
Yeah.
Capitalist manifesto that they call that. It's like they sort of somehow psychologically figured out that 8 hours a day is just short enough for people not to lose their minds or start acting out against the person in charge. Dave Chappelle has a really good bit about that, and it's true. I think that the paradigm, let's talk about motivation too. What motivates us to do the thing that we want to do? I find like a lot of times in life, coming out of the education system, it's taught to us that, we have to work all week to get the thing that we want, so we could spend just a little of the thing that we earned on the thing that we actually love, which is kind of like so backwards, because you got to think about like, that's breeding an unhappy society. And what's the result of an unhappy society? Where's this going?
Yeah.
The problem with the education society, our education bit there is the teachers are coming right from that academic world. You know what I mean? They're embedded in the academic world, and that's all because I see with my kids all the time. And that push, I had it myself, that push directly to university after you're done high school, and it's all part of that academic world. And there should be some alternatives to that.
And I think with the pandemic, they've also realized that with all the kids being at home, is that the kind of things that they're learning have really, they don't have skills. They don't have skills that are meaningful in the real world, like being able to cook and take care of themselves. And the stuff that's being taught is, it's all IT, cybersecurity, coding. Oh my God, like everything that's being taught is focused on this monetary system. And the idea is that's why, when we talk about ADHD and ADD and that kind of thing, is like, personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with the kids. The problem is the system, is that we're trying to it's a disconnect, it's a dissonance, right? It's the vibration is wrong for what these kids are trying to bring. I mean, and they're gifted kids, but they just I don't know, well, they're highlighting the cracks in the system.
This is like super interesting to me, because there's so many places where like human behavior all butt together. Like, I remember in elementary school having friends whose families were on social assistance, and they always had nicer things than me. And it was a priorities thing. So I would go to their house and we would have like a bedroom with no door that had a blanket over it, but there would be a swimming pool in the yard, and the kids would have really expensive sneakers. And then my parents would be super critical, and they would say they don't know how to spend money, and they're lazy and they're wasting this money. And I realized that it was because those parents grew up in poverty. Their kids had to go to school. They knew their kids were going to get socially punished for not having good enough status things. And so they took important household expenses and dumped them into consumer goods to make sure their kids could have a better life than they did, right? So there's like all these things, like when you really get into how people think and the social structure, like the problems really stack up on each other in that kind of way, right? Or like most of the people that are really against annual basic income are people that have themselves worked super hard, probably come out of some kind of poverty. They're mostly blue collar people, and they feel like if somebody gets something for nothing, in their opinion, it devalues the work that they've done and the suffering their family has gone through, right? So it's like you have to drill down in order to be compassionate and come up with an argument that could help them see past that, right? I guess.
There's
Well
a great
said.
oh, sorry, I mean to butt in.
No, it's you.
Oh, there's a great video I watched. There's this guy. It was like, I think I don't remember what it was, but this guy was saying that like the wealthy 1% who are making products too expensive don't realize that the bubble's about to collapse, because there's a high amount of low income families that can't buy the product that they're selling. So eventually what's going to happen is what he calls the pitchforks are coming. Like we got to level the playing field out, because if we're continuously just focusing on the middle class and upper class, there's a big financial gap, and sure enough, eventually it's just going to be them after us. And that's where the money system starts to be wacky, because eventually the money itself is not going to be worth anything, because it's not helping anybody anymore. It's not helping the majority, I should say.
And today we're talking about a lot of different concepts about alternatives and visions about where we could be and where we should aim towards. In I think it's mid-July, Amy will be joining us again, and we'll be talking about alternative economics in action and things that are real world examples that are already happening. Amy's going to be talking about Life Schoolhouse, which is a really cool concept. And we're going to have, I've invited Shireen in. Shireen used to work here at the farm last year and was a student the year before that. And he's from Bhutan, and Bhutan has a whole different alternative economy happening as well. And so I'm looking forward to having him in to explain more about that and their happiness index as opposed to the gross domestic product index, and all neat things that are already in action. And with that, we're right at 11 and a little natural pause. So good time to wrap, unless anybody has any parting thoughts and any concluding thoughts they want to add to this conversation. All right, I think we're wrapping. Thanks everybody for your time. Thanks Edee for joining us. Thanks Amy for your input there too. I'll see you guys on farm later on.